Hey guys, welcome to 12 Tone. Today we're going to talk about modulation. Modulation is the act of moving from one key to another within a single piece of music. Now, I do need to warn you, this is one of the major conceptual sticking points in learning music theory. Understanding modulation requires unlearning a lot of things we had to learn earlier, but the end result is a great tool for composing and arranging along with a deeper understanding of the fundamental nature of harmony. So if anything confuses you or you're not sure if you understand, ask questions and try the practice exercises. We're here to help. Modulations can be broken down into a lot of different subtypes, but I'm going to focus on three of the biggest ones: parallel modulation, direct modulation, and pivot chord modulation. The first of those is probably the simplest to understand. Parallel modulation is when you change scales but keep the same tonic. For instance, you could start your piece in D major and then transition at some point to D minor or even D Dorian. This changes the emotional feel of the piece without affecting the tonic grounding. This may sound familiar to those of you who've watched our previous videos. What's the difference between parallel modulation and modal interchange, which we discussed a few weeks ago? Basically, it's a question of duration. While there's no clean dividing line, modal interchange involves temporary borrowing for flavor, often just for a single chord, whereas parallel modulation is a complete shift with the intent to stay. Maybe not stay forever, but at least for a section or something. Which one it is, though, is sometimes a subjective judgment, so go with what your ear tells you. Second is what's known as direct or unprepared modulation. This is where you change the key without warning. You're just chugging along in B minor, and then suddenly, you're in C. This is a great way to quickly and cheaply build up energy, and it's often used in the last chorus of a song for a final punch. For an extreme example, check out the end of Beyoncé's Love on Top. Listen to how many times they get away with repeating the same chorus, because each time the range shifts a little higher and the energy lifts with it. Because it's sudden and unprepared, direct modulation works best when it's moving to keys that are chromatically close to the original key. Often this means either a major or minor second, although thirds are doable as well. Because the point is to lift the energy up, these tend to ascend. You rarely see direct modulations moving down. The last type I want to talk about is a more complicated concept called pivot chord modulation. Pivot chord modulation is where you smooth out the transition by using one or more chords that are in both keys. For instance, here are all the triads in A major. Now here are all the triads in E major. We can see at a glance that a lot of these are the same. They both have A major, C sharp minor, E major, and F sharp minor. Any of these chords are viable pivot options. So we can start with this progression in A major, slip in a few pivot chords, and then resolve out of it to E. See how that felt like a complete resolution even though in the key we started in that chord should have been dominant? That's the power of pivot chord modulation. It's hard to pull off, but if you do it right, your listener may not even know they've changed keys at all. However, there are some limitations. Much like how direct modulation liked to move to scales that were chromatically close, pivot chord modulation prefers keys that are harmonically close. The more notes the scales have in common, the easier pivot chords will be to find and the smoother the transition will sound. It's a lot easier to go from G to D, which has one different note, than to D flat, which has 6. In fact, keys a tritone apart have no diatonic chords in common, making pivot chord modulation between them incredibly difficult. But not impossible. We'll get to that later. For now, that's modulation. Try the exercises. Please ask questions if you don't understand something. Join our mailing list to get all our new videos. And keep on rockin'.